True power does not lie in surpassing others. It is not about defeating others, humiliating them, or proving a kind of superiority that, deep down, is always fragile, always needy, always dependent on the validation of others. True power lies in transcending oneself, in silencing the internal tumult, in mastering one's own reactions, in governing that invisible space where your spirit resides. Many live in this silent exhaustion, trying to appear more clever, more shrewd, more powerful, investing everything in external strategies, as if the world were merely a game board and people, pieces to be manipulated. But they fail to see that true fragility is not the inability to conquer others, but the inability to conquer oneself. For those who do not master their impulses will always be mastered by them. Those who do not govern their fears will always be manipulated by those who provoke them. More than appearing clever, more than being admired, the true victory is to achieve the strategic serenity of one who understands that conquering others is fleeting, but conquering oneself is final. Epictetus, the slave, grasped this truth with a clarity that even today challenges us. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, knew that his greatest adversary was not the enemy outside, but the desires within, the illusions, the vanity, the pride that silently threatened his integrity. This video reveals the Stoic tactics that transform the outer game into a reflection of inner triumph. Because those who master themselves do not need to surpass others. Their presence is already a silent and definitive victory. There is an exhaustion that does not arise from excessive effort, but from wasted effort. The deep fatigue of those who try to control everything, as if they were only safe when they could dominate every variable, every person, every circumstance. But this is an invisible error, because there are things that simply do not depend on you. Epictetus, with precision, left us the dichotomy of control. There is what belongs to our power, and there is what lies beyond it. Everything that does not depend on us must be serenely accepted, not as resignation, but as liberation. And everything that does depend demands action. The breaking of expectation is this: not controlling everything is not weakness, it is freedom. When you feel powerless, confused, paralyzed, ask yourself, does this depend on me? If yes, act with excellence. If not, release it, let it go. Allow life to follow its course without your resistance. Like the sailor who adjusts the sails but never tries to command the wind. And thus you discover that there is a superior strength not in the attempt to dominate everything, but in the silent clarity of knowing exactly what is and what is not under your power. But mastering what is under your power is not enough. There is still something even more essential. There is a fear that paralyzes, that weakens, that silently corrodes the courage to live. The fear of loss, the fear of failure, the fear of what might happen and destroy what has been carefully built. But Seneca taught the opposite: to anticipate misfortunes mentally, not to attract them, but so that when they come, they will not encounter resistance, but serene acceptance. To premeditate difficulties is an act of fortitude and not of pessimism. To hope that everything will go well is to create a trap that captures the unprepared and shatters them when the inevitable adversity arrives. But to prepare for the worst is to create freedom. It is not to be surprised. It is not to be dominated. It is to be ready, not only to triumph, but to endure, to survive, to remain. Before acting, before deciding, visualize adversities. Contemplate them. Accept them. Like the warrior who does not train only for victory, but above all to withstand defeat, to resist, to rise, even when strength seems exhausted. Those who prepare for the worst do not fear the future. Do not freeze before the unexpected. Do not break before the inevitable. Because they know that true strength is not in avoiding pain, but in being ready to pass through it, without losing dignity, without losing serenity, without losing oneself. But emotional freedom does not end here. There is still an invisible prison to be overcome. There is a prison that few perceive, but that almost everyone inhabits. The invisible prison of emotional dependency, the unconscious need for approval, or the paralyzing fear of criticism. Many live like leaves in the wind, lifted by praise, shattered by reproach, oscillating between euphoria and shame. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, praise adds nothing, and criticism takes nothing away. Because true worth does not lie in what others say, but in who we are when no one is watching. Those who are driven by public opinion will never be free. They will always be molded, conditioned, manipulated by the whims of others' gaze. True freedom begins when we understand that neither praise should be sought nor criticism feared. Both are like the wind, at times gentle, at times violent, but they never alter the essence of a tree that remains rooted. Receive praise, be grateful, but do not let it inflate you. Receive criticism, welcome it, but do not let it wound you. The direction of one's character must not sway according to applause or condemnation, but remain firm, silent, coherent with what one is. Like the tree that does not bend with the wind, but remains silent while all around it oscillates, so too, those who practice strategic indifference find an invincible serenity. And in that serenity, they discover a strength that no one can give and no one can take away. But there is still a practice that transforms every response into an act of power. There is a mistake, subtle but devastating, to react automatically, without awareness, as one who lives on autopilot, as one who hands over the reins of their own life into the hands of any stimulus, of any provocation. Epictetus, with his silent wisdom, warns us, between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom. Those who respond immediately become predictable, vulnerable, manipulable. But those who create a pause, who delay their reaction, expand their power of choice. They transform impulse into intention. The shift in paradigm is here. It is not strength to react quickly, but weakness. It is not power to respond immediately, but submission to instinct, to emotion, to the automatic pattern that so often leads to destruction, to regret, to pain. When provoked, when challenged, when incited, create a space, even if minuscule, but sufficient to completely redefine the game. Count to 3. Breathe, feel, observe, and only then decide. Like the chess player who never moves a piece by impulse, but always by intention, always by strategy, always by clarity. The strategic pause is the art of refusing to be dominated by the heat of the moment, by the haste of emotion, by the blindness of instinct. It is to choose consciously what you will do, what you will say, what you will withhold. And in doing so, to transform every response into an act of power, into a gesture of self-mastery, into a silent victory over oneself. But not every obstacle must be avoided. Some must be welcomed and loved. There is a dilemma that torments silently those who insist on resisting the inevitable. Pain does not lie solely in what happens, but above all in the resistance to accept what cannot be changed. It is suffering that doubles through refusal, through denial, through the vain attempt to fight against what already is. Marcus Aurelius, in his imperturbable serenity, practiced amor fati, to love one's fate. Not merely to accept it, but to wish for it to happen. Because he recognized that everything that occurs is an essential part of his own path, of his own learning, of his own strengthening. Every obstacle can be seen as an enemy or as a tool for fortification. The difference lies in the attitude. To resist is to wound oneself twice. It is to become paralyzed. It is to be consumed. To embrace is to transform. It is to grow. It is to continue without the weight of resentment, but with the lightness of understanding. When something difficult happens, when a setback presents itself, ask, how can this serve me? And in asking, the obstacle ceases to be a barrier and becomes a bridge, an invitation, an opportunity. Like the river that does not try to destroy the rock, but flows around it, without losing its current, without losing its strength, without losing its essence. Those who practice amor fati transform every challenge into an invisible ally, into a silent teacher, into an inseparable part of the journey. And in doing so, they discover that freedom does not lie in avoiding obstacles, but in knowing that none of them can stop those who accept, those who embrace, those who love what is. But full presence also requires another fundamental element: attention to what many do not perceive. There is a mistake, almost imperceptible, but profoundly limiting. To live on autopilot, repeating patterns, reproducing reactions, without realizing that life is passing by, that opportunities are hiding, that details are being lost in distraction, in haste, in superficiality. The Stoics, especially Seneca, taught the necessity of constant vigilance over one's own thoughts, over one's own emotions, over one's own impulses. Because those who do not observe, those who do not perceive, those who are not present, live at the mercy of what others decide, of what circumstances impose, of what chance dictates. The breaking of illusion is here. cleverness is not speed of reaction, but depth of perception. It is not to act quickly, but to perceive first. It is not to respond first, but to understand what others cannot see, because they are too busy being carried by the current of automaticism. To be present is to cultivate mindful attention, a state of presence where the body feels, the mind observes, and the spirit chooses with clarity, with serenity, with intention. In complex situations, breathe, observe, wait, and only then decide. Like the hunter who, in absolute silence, perceives the slightest movement of the prey, even before it perceives his presence, so too, those who live with mindful attention see what the distracted do not, perceive what the hurried ignore, and therefore they act with precision, with effectiveness, with a strategic intelligence that does not need to be announced, because it simply imposes itself. But there is still another trap to be avoided: the excess that seduces and imprisons. There is a trap, subtle but profoundly destructive, that seduces by the appearance of strength, but ultimately reveals a hidden fragility. It is the incessant pursuit of excess, the belief that the more one accumulates, the more one is, the more one is worth, the more one dominates. Many believe that to accumulate is a sign of superiority, that to conquer always more is proof of cleverness, of intelligence, of power. But Seneca, in his serene clarity, reminds us, it takes little to live well. And those who know this understand that true intelligence does not lie in having more, but in knowing what truly matters. Those who always want more are slaves to desire. They are captives of what they still do not possess. They are vulnerable to the seduction of excess. The breaking of expectation is this: those who know how to refuse know how to master. Those who know how to say no know how to preserve their freedom, their clarity, their presence. Because excess exhausts, scatters, confuses, while moderation concentrates, strengthens, illuminates. Before seeking more power, more status, more possessions, there is a question that can restore lucidity. Is this essential, or is it excess? And in answering with honesty, one finds a silent space where the superfluous dissolves and what is essential remains. Like the archer who does not overfill his quiver because he knows that precision matters more than quantity, so too, those who practice moderation discover that less is freedom, less is clarity, less is strength, and that those who are not seduced by excess walk more lightly, more firmly, more whole, surpassing not only others, but above all, themselves. But there is still a desire that must be neutralized to reach full freedom. There is a fragility, almost invisible, but absolutely limiting, that manifests when one desires too much. Those who desire too much become captives, not of what they possess, but of what they still do not have. They live in lack, in waiting, in constant frustration, driven by expectations that often will never come to pass. Epictetus, with the wisdom of one who understood the essence of freedom, taught, freedom begins in the renunciation of disordered desire. Because desire, when not moderated, when not observed, becomes a prison, a dependency, a silent suffering. The shift in paradigm is direct and liberating. Fewer desires, more freedom, more strategic intelligence. Those who desire little, fear little, suffer little, depend little. And those who depend little are freer, lighter, more difficult to manipulate, and easier to be happy. To periodically review one's own desires is an act of maturity, of self-mastery, of clarity. To eliminate those desires born of comparison, of vanity, of social pressure, is to create space for what truly matters, for what truly enriches, for what truly nourishes. Like the traveler who carries only the essential, and therefore moves lightly, swiftly, nimbly, while others drag themselves under the weight of what they believe they cannot leave behind. Those who neutralize excessive desires transform their own life into a path, more free, more authentic, more intelligent, and above all, more peaceful. Because those who need little always have enough, and those who always have enough are invincible. But there is still a silent and invisible practice that distinguishes those who appear from those who truly are. There is a mistake, silent but profoundly draining, that consists in cultivating an image that does not correspond to one's essence. To live under the weight of internal dissonance, projecting to the world an appearance that hides an absence. Pretending to be what one is not, wishing to appear as what one does not feel, seeking recognition for that which one does not possess. Marcus Aurelius, with his serene wisdom, reminds us, "True glory lies in doing what must be done, not in appearing to be what one is not." Because those who pretend to be intelligent will always be insecure. But those who simply are, those who live in coherence between what they think, what they feel, what they speak, and what they do, will always be respected. The revelation is simple and liberating. True strength is not in how much one manages to impress, but in how much one manages to be. Silently, whole, coherent, authentic. Those who live trying to convince are always at war. Those who live in coherence are always at peace. To align intentions, words, and actions is the invisible practice that builds silent respect. It is not discourse, it is not performance, it is not aesthetics that sustains presence, but integrity, solidity, coherence. That is perceived even when nothing is said, even when nothing is displayed. Like the root, that, invisible, sustains the entire tree, that no one sees, but that everything depends on. So too, those who cultivate invisible coherence raise a strength, discreet but unshakable. And that strength, silent but unmistakable, is what distinguishes those who merely appear from those who truly are. And thus we arrive at the pinnacle of this journey, the silent victory of those who master themselves. In the end, the true victory is not over others, but over oneself. More than winning debates, more than triumphing in contests, more than gaining recognition. The pinnacle of Stoic cleverness lies in conquering one's own weaknesses, one's own illusions, one's own fears. Epictetus remains an eternal symbol of one who understood that no one can imprison those who master their own mind. Even enslaved, he was free. Free because there was no chain capable of limiting the inviolable space where his consciousness dwelled, where his serenity flourished, where his silent superiority imposed itself, without effort, without the need to prove. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, knew that despite commanding armies, his most important battle was fought within himself, against pride, against vanity, against the illusion that external power could substitute for inner strength. His greatness did not lie in the authority he held, but in the serenity with which he mastered his own impulses. This is the invitation, silent, that echoes across time. To stop seeking strategies to defeat others and to begin cultivating the practices that prevent anyone from being able to defeat you. Because those who master themselves do not fear, do not waver, do not corrupt. The true victor does not shout, does not show off, does not need to convince. He simply walks, silent, secure, because he knows that he has already won where it matters most, within himself. And that victory no one sees, but everyone feels. No one celebrates, but everyone respects. Because the presence of one who masters himself is always a definitive victory, an invisible fortress raised in the heart of chaos. If this message touched you, leave in the comments, "I master myself." And remember, master your impulses, cultivate serenity, and simply be. If you felt that this video strengthened you, like and subscribe to the channel. In this way, you help us to spread even further this philosophy of transformation, silent and profound.